everyone, welcome back to Writer's Corner. I'm Radrani and I'm from Tilsey Creative Writers. It's been a while since my last video, but I'm back today with another one of my short stories that I'd like to share with you all. It's called What the Eyes See, and I hope you like it. So, here we go. What the Eyes See. Julie looked through the album with great enthusiasm, as if seeing it for the first time. She gently ran her fingers over the photographs, holding back the tears as bittersweet memories flooded her mind. Each image had a story to tell. The day, time, place, and things said and done, she remembered them all so vividly. She thought of her wedding day. It had been a lavish affair with no expense spared. She and Christopher had married in Goa so that their extended families and distant relatives could attend. A grand reception had followed for their friends on their return home. She never once imagined that life would pan out the way it had. After reminiscing for some time, she closed the album and placed it in the box before sealing it. She scanned the study. It had been the hardest room in the entire house to pack, since many of the things had belonged to Christopher. A year after his death, she had finally brought herself to organize his possessions, disposing of many to charity and some to his parents and brother. With a heavy heart, Julie walked around her half-empty mansion. Despite its bare walls and packaging boxes in every room, it still retained its beauty and magnificence. She was relieved that the house had been sold, but at the same time was sad to leave. Every part of it held a memory. Her eyes pictured every scene. Her son running around, family meals at the table, cozying up on the sofa with her husband for an evening film, friends and dinner parties. The music, voices and laughter echoed in her ears. She was gazing out of the window onto the street when she noticed the green Range Rover again, parked a few meters away from her house. She had seen it in her street every day that week. Curious yet wary, Julie peered at the male driver, but he turned away as if to avoid eye contact. She moved away from the window and, glancing at her watch, saw that it was 1:45. She had to pick Harry up at 2:00 from her sisters. It was the half-term holidays and he had gone to play with his cousins. Feeling bored and craving some company, Julie decided to go to her sisters earlier than arranged. Taking her handbag and phone from the hallway, she headed towards the front door. A loud knock startled her. She saw through the glass panels that it was the man with the Range Rover. She took a step back and waited. What does he want? Shall I open the door? He knows I'm in. It'll be rude not to. Julie opened the door cautiously. Yes, can I help you? Hello, he gave a half smile. He hesitated and glanced a few times at the sold sign. Sorry, you're not from the estate agents, are you? Oh, no, sorry, I'm not. I'm just looking for someone. Do you know anyone by the name of Christopher Fernandez? She eyed him curiously. Why? I'm sorry, who are you? My name's Alexander Papas. He paused. Is this Christopher Fernandez's house? Yes, well, it was. I'm afraid he died just over a year ago. I see. I'm sorry. And are you his wife? Is your name Julie by any chance? Yes, why? Oh, I just wanted to make sure I had the correct address. How do you know my husband? Did you work for him? No, nothing like that. He was a close acquaintance. How? He never mentioned your name. Julie grew suspicious. You're not a private investigator or an undercover officer, are you? No, Mrs. Fernandez, I'm not. Well, what can I do for you, Mr. Papas? I need to speak to you about something. It's about your late husband and it's very important, please. My husband. Look, I'm quite busy today, and besides, I don't even know you. Please, Mrs. Fernandez, it won't take long. It's very important. She saw the concern on his face. What could be so important? At least tell me what it's about. He drew in a deep breath. Just over a year ago, in January, I had a corneal transplant. I believe your late husband was my donor. I'm his recipient, he said softly. She was taken aback by the revelation. Is he really the same Alexander? She instinctively looked into his brown eyes and subconsciously compared them to her husband's. She froze for a few moments before uttering a word. How did you find me? You're not even supposed to know anything about me. Who gave you my details? No one, Mrs. Fernandez. No one gave me your details. I just knew. She stared at him in bewilderment. What? You can't just turn up on my doorstep and say something like that. I've a good mind to call the police. No, please don't, he pleaded, and handed her the letter she had written to him addressed, Dear Recipient. She instantly recognized her own handwriting. You must have got my letter too. I kept a photocopy of it for memory. Here. He handed it to her. I'm sure you'll recognize the content. Julie was stupefied. She viewed him with suspicion. How do I know that you haven't stolen these? He scoffed. That's not true, Mrs. Fernandez. We can easily prove that those are our signatures and handwriting. Okay, so you're my husband's recipient. But how did you find me? Someone must have given you my address. You probably have contacts in the transplant center. You must have pulled some strings. No, no one, I swear, no one gave me any of your details or any information about you, he insisted. Who are you really, and what do you want? I'm Alexander Papas. On the afternoon of 12th of January 2017, I was involved in a car crash. Your husband was being pursued by the police when his car crashed into mine. We were both taken to the nearest hospital. He later died. I survived but suffered serious injuries. I needed a corneal transplant, and he just happened to be my donor, and I'm his recipient. Julie felt unsettled, but her suspicion turned to intrigue. Should she believe him? Everything he said so far was true. He seemed decent, well-dressed, well-groomed, and well-spoken. He seemed safe to be around. Should she trust him, or would she be letting her emotion cloud her judgment? She looked down at the letters in her hand. She remembered writing hers and receiving his. Alexander was a name she never forgot. I think you had better come in, she said quietly and stepped back. We can talk outside if you like, if you'd be more comfortable, he suggested. This is a nosy neighbourhood, Mr. Papas, and it's still cold for March, so please come in. What the hell am I doing? I must be mad. Thank you, he replied. It's 1 o'clock now, she stated, looking at her watch. I'm afraid I don't have long. I told my sister that I'll be back by 2 to pick up my son. Oh, I understand. I won't take too much of your time. Thank you for agreeing to speak to me. Please, take a seat, she gestured to the sofa. She gave back the letters to him, which he put in the inside pocket of his long black coat before removing it. Placing his coat beside him, he sat down without slouching. He clasped his hands and gently rested them on his lap. He gave the room a quick scan before turning to her. When are you moving? In 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Good job I caught you in time. Julie sat on the sofa opposite him. She placed her coat and handbag on the floor next to her and kept her phone in her lap. She took a closer look at her visitor, clean-shaven with clear olive skin. He wore a well-fitted grey woolen suit, a smart blue shirt and a tie to match. His black shoes were impeccable and of Italian leather in her opinion. His expensive attire reminded her of Christopher. She found him to be pleasant-looking with a kind face. He appeared to be a few years older than Christopher would have been, plus a few more than her. He was of an average build, and though tall, he was a couple of inches shorter than Christopher had been. She felt he could pass for handsome, but was not a patch on her late beloved husband. "We really shouldn't be meeting like this," she said. "Technically, there's no law against it," he informed. Firstly, I want to say that your husband, you've both given me a new lease of life. I can't thank you enough." "It's okay. I'm glad something good, something wonderful's come out of his death." She paused. "And the accident. How do you know it was my husband?" "Mrs. Fernandez, the thing is, I remember being in the accident, being taken to hospital, the injuries, being told I needed a corneal transplant. I even vaguely remember the other man's face, and his car was a large black BMW. But I was just told that the other driver had died. You see, no one told me that the other driver was called Christopher Fernandez, or that he was my donor. I just knew. I wish you'd stop saying I just knew. I'm sorry that you were hit by my husband. Are you looking for compensation, Mr. Papas? I'm afraid I've been left with next to nothing." "I don't need compensation. I've been given something more valuable than any compensation." "Tell me, we only mentioned our first names in the letters. How did you know my surname? You said no one gave you my contact details. You keep saying you just knew. What do you mean by that?" He leaned forward slightly and waited a moment as if to collect his thoughts. "Okay, you're going to think I'm mad, but please hear me out," he began. "For the past 3 or 4 months, I've been plagued by these visions, these images. I've remembered things, but they're not my memories, not my life. Do you know what I mean?" She looked at him instinctively, thinking about what he had just said. "You think I'm mad, don't you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I don't. Please, carry on." "As I was saying, I've been remembering things, seeing things in my mind every day. It started off only when I was asleep, and I thought they were dreams. But I soon realized they're more than that. They feel so real. They are real." "But what do you actually see?" she asked, edging forward on her seat. "This house, this street and names? A small black and red suitcase. I can't say the exact design, but it's about this size," he said, demonstrating. I see a phenomenal amount of money. I'm sure it's in that suitcase. I know it's nothing to do with my accounts. Then there's a brown envelope in a box of letters and an old brown teddy bear." He paused and gave her an expectant look. "Go on," she prodded. "I'm listening." "Well, there's an image of a summer house, brown muddy boots and a toolbox. Sometimes I hear hammering and a woman's angry voice, but I can't make out the words. I see these feet in muddy boots walking towards the summer house with the toolbox and the black and red suitcase." He rubbed his face with the palms of his hands and ran his fingers through his thick brown hair. "And you have a summer house, don't you, Mrs. Fernandez?" "Call me Julie, and yes, I do, but you can easily see that from the outside going past the house." "No, you can't," he protested. "It's concealed by a large wooden gate, so you would have to know for sure." "Okay, I suppose," she agreed. Do you talk to him, my husband?" No, I'm not a medium. Look, I know how ridiculous I must sound. Before my transplant, if anyone had said this to me, I wouldn't have taken them seriously." "Have you told anyone else, Mr. Papas?" "Alexander, or better still, Alex." "All right, Alex. Well, have you?" "Only my mother. No one else will believe me. My mother knew straight away. You see, she's very superstitious and she believes in things like life after death, reincarnation, the supernatural, and so on. She said it was something to do with cellular memory transference. Then I read about it. I'm sure that there's some truth in it. Have you heard of it? And does your mother know that you've come to see me? Yes, it was actually her idea. And is this why you've been coming into this street all week, to tell me this? Yes, but I finally plucked up the courage today. Julie gave a big sigh. She sat back and pondered over what Alex said. Why am I even entertaining this conversation? Do you believe me, Mrs. Julie? After Christopher died, I got interested in stuff like this. I was curious. I've seen documentaries and read several articles on the subject. Okay, so what are you saying? Maybe this phenomenon does exist. I'm not sure. I'm in two minds. And in our case, I don't know. It's a lot to take in. She ruffled her hair and rubbed her forehead. Honestly, I'm confused. On one hand, I can believe that you're the recipient. But how did you just envision my full name and address? And who your donor was? I want to believe you, but I can't. She shook her head almost apologetically. And the thing with the summer house, suitcase and money, I'm struggling to relate to that. They were quiet for a moment. He looked as if he was contemplating what to say next. Oh, I'm sorry, she spoke, breaking the silence. I haven't asked if you would like anything to drink. No, that's okay. I'm fine, thanks. He cleared his throat. I believe your husband left you and your son a phenomenal amount of money in that suitcase. I think he's hidden it in the summer house, probably under the floorboards. That's why there's the toolbox and the hammering. The brown muddy boots must be his. And do you recall any arguments with him? What was the last conversation you two had? And I'm sure that the brown envelope and brown bear have some significance. She listened to him in disbelief and struggled to find a response. I know what your husband did and what he was involved in. She flinched. What on earth do you mean? Your husband's two main trusted men in his company also worked alongside him in his other dealings. They tried to pull a fast one on him. He found out and got back more than his fair share. Obviously, they weren't too happy and went after him. One of the men shot him, and he was badly wounded. He managed to escape in his car, but they followed him. They wanted him dead. But he was killed in a police pursuit. Yes, but he was also first shot by one of the men. You must have known about the gunshot wound when you went to the hospital. The doctors might have mentioned it, but I thought he was shot by the police. Anyway, how do you know all this? Who are you? She grew anxious, and her hand lightly clasped her throat. He shrugged his shoulders. I've been asking myself how I know all this. I thought they were his friends and colleagues, and that the police were after all three of them. He gave a quick, sarcastic laugh. You must know that there are no friends in this business. Someone tipped off the police. That's how the pursuit started, but the police were on to them for a while anyway. They'd have been caught sooner or later. My husband never told me about any money or disagreement with his colleagues. Police thought it was an anonymous tip-off, but it was your husband. What? She shrieked. That's absurd. Yes, but you see, he knew he was going to die. They were going to kill him. They'd shot him once and they'd shoot again. Then they'd come after you and your son and the money. Yeah, they'd get caught eventually, but not before they got to you. I guess he thought even if he got caught, they would too. And you and your son would be safe. Your money would be safe. My money? What's my money? The humongous amount that was never recovered. It was never found. Looking at her closer, but I'm telling you where it is. Your husband was a very clever man. There was another silence between them. Her head began to spin, stunned by what she'd just heard. Oh, and you probably know that the 2 men crashed and died in the pursuit, he added. How does he know all this? Honestly, who are you, Alex? What do you do? I'm a lawyer. I work at Stedman & Co. Aha! She threw her hands up. So, you've done all your background checks because no identities were revealed in the news or the papers. No outsiders knew about Christopher, only family, friends and his employees. I should have guessed with you all suited and booted and your questions. No, Julie, it's not like that. From the letters, okay, you probably are the recipient, but you must have pulled some strings and got my contact details and dug up my husband's past. No, lawyers aren't above the law. I don't understand. Why did you come here? I wanted to see my donor's family and thank them in person. I wanted to tell you about my visions about the money and how he actually died and why. Julie, you need to remove the suitcase. You've sold this house and there's a chance the new owners might find it and keep it. Or worse, they might hand it in to the police. It'll get traced back to you. Either way, you'll lose a lot of money. These things will always catch up with you. Let me help you sort it out. She looked at him doubtfully. So, if we did find the money, what then? Do you want to share? Are you going to report it? No, of course not. Why? I don't believe you. Call it gratitude. I don't want the family to be punished. Believe me, my motives are purely altruistic. Wow, a lawyer with a conscience. Yes, we're a rarity, but we do exist. The tension eased a little, and they smiled at each other. Look, Julie, I admit I don't approve of what he did, his way of life. But there must have been something good in him to be a donor, to give the gift of sight. My job is to pass on his message. Is there anything sinister buried here? No, of course not. Your husband was not evil. He just got mixed up with the wrong crowd. She waited a few minutes before speaking, trying to process all the information in her head. His company shut down, she began. All our assets were seized, even his savings. Only my account and our joint account were left untouched. Did you know this? No, I'm sorry. My visions didn't stretch that far. How about this house? Oh, fortunately he put it in my name. And besides, it was given to us by my in-laws for our wedding. Wow, expensive gift. Yes, Christopher's family is very wealthy, but by legal means. But I had to sell this place. I need to release some money for Harry and me. And I just need to get away. A fresh start. You understand, don't you? Of course. And after his maternal grandfather passed away, he inherited a substantial amount. He said he'd keep it safe, but I never got to know what happened to it. She shrugged her shoulders. Perhaps it got seized too. She began toying with her gold emerald-set bracelet. You know, I only found out what he was doing a few months before the accident. I never told a soul. He promised me he'd give it up. Perhaps he was going to. I'll never know. After the accident, the police came and questioned me. They searched the house but found nothing. For months they kept interrogating me on and off. They refused to believe that I had nothing to do with all this. She paused for a moment. Then, staring blankly into space, she spoke in a soft tone. He was a fantastic dad and a loving husband. I was married to him for 6 years. We had a happy marriage, our beautiful boy, a lovely home, money. We seemed the perfect family. She smiled wistfully. He was a pharmacist, but I never knew the sort of drugs he was dealing with. She turned to Alex. You see, his company was doing well and he was from a wealthy family. So I thought that's where all the money came from. I guess greed got the better of him. She noticed Alex's attentiveness towards her and felt embarrassed. Gosh, why am I telling you all this? I barely know you. Because sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger. He sat back and stretched his legs a little. Drumming his fingers faintly, he studied the room around him. Are you moving far? He asked. No, just a couple of miles away from here. The new development on the way to town, and I'll be nearer to my sister. I see. What do you do, by the way? Do you work? Yeah, I'm a secretary at my son's school. Right. It felt surreal. For a moment, looking at Alex was like looking at Christopher. But soon reality kicked in. He was not her husband, not Christopher. I've often wondered who my husband's recipient is. More so, since receiving the letter, your letter, I've wondered what you did, what I would say if I ever met you. If I ever heard the name Alexander or Alex, I would wonder if it was you. She met his eyes. Today's conversation has been the strangest I've had in my life, but I'm glad I've met you. Thank you, likewise. And I'll always be grateful to you and your late husband. Realizing it was 2:05, she politely reminded him that she needed to collect her son. He thanked her again and before leaving gave her his card, urging her to call him. How can I trust you? Because you have no reason not to. She showed him out. After quickly texting her sister to say that she was on her way, Julie searched information on Alex's firm. To her relief, he had been truthful and his credentials were impressive. She also checked the letters they had exchanged, confirming that there was no discrepancy there. She went into the kitchen to pick up a bottle of water when the summer house caught her attention. She stopped by the window and stared at it. Could there really be money in there? Was Alex sure there was nothing more sinister too? Finally, gathering her things, she made her way out. Julie mulled over her conversation with Alex. Would he lie? What did he have to gain? Would he really risk his career over this? Should she tell anyone? But to whom? The police were out of the question. She felt she could not confide in her in-laws, and her parents would needlessly worry. Her brother was overprotective and would not understand. Next was her sister, a sceptical, strong-minded, pragmatic, no-nonsense female who never quite warmed to Christopher. She would only chastise Julie if she were to know about Alex. Having spent a restless night, Julie woke up the next morning feeling tired and with a pounding head. She looked at her summer house through her kitchen window, recalling her conversation with Alex. Once again she began to question his motives. She believed part of what he had said, but was still unsure about the rest. She thought of the objects he mentioned. She was certain that all the suitcases she owned were either in the garage or in some store cupboard inside the house. She told herself that his office must be full of brown envelopes, and brown bears were a common soft toy. Hence, he was confusing his visions with reality. Nevertheless, Julie was curious to find out if it was true, but fear held her back. She adored the summer house. It was her little haven, and she used it frequently. It was just a few days previously that she was in there boxing up items. But now she felt terrified to enter it. I'll go and look tomorrow. The next day was the same, and the day after that, and the day after, until one final day when she could no longer handle the suspense. Still feeling terrified, taking the key and her mobile phone, she ventured to the summer house. With trembling hands, she opened the door and gingerly went inside. She switched the light on even though it was broad daylight. She stood inside the entrance, leaving the door open. With a hand on her breastbone, palpating her thumping heart, she studied the room. It was exactly as she had left it. With everything packed away, there was just the pretty curtains and neat furniture left, but it still looked beautiful and cozy. She checked the floorboards, the walls, the ceilings, the windows and the door. Everything seemed intact. What should she do? What would anyone in her position do? She considered her options. Check for herself, call Alex, or leave it. If she checked for herself, where would she start? She could not afford to damage anything. She had just sold the house, and the summer house had been one of the key selling points. Her next option was to call Alex. But what if he was wrong? Otherwise, what if she just left it? But some part of her deep inside was tempted at the thought of money. And as Alex had warned her, the new owners must not find it, if there was really any money. And she wanted to avoid a police investigation. She debated with herself. She eventually succumbed to her relentless curiosity and quickly veered to her more adventurous side. She got the toolbox and randomly picked a spot in the middle of the room. Using her amateur carpentry skills, she removed a few of the floorboards only to find concrete flagstones. She sighed in dismay. This is ridiculous. How can anything be hidden here? What did Alex mean? Was he lying? She looked across the rest of the floor. It could be anywhere. With an unsuccessful result, she fitted the floorboards back in their place. Not wanting to leave the mystery unsolved, she decided to contact Alex, perhaps in a day or two, and pursue the matter further. Satisfied with her decision, she stepped out, locked the door of the summer house, and went back into her house. She had just over a week left before vacating the house and had already boxed many of the items. She went into the garage where she stored her travel bags and suitcases, all neatly stacked in a pile. She took them into her bedroom, two at a time, and then packed her possessions. She moved on to her valuable items, which she decided to take herself in her car. Opening the drawers of her dressing table, she started placing the various jewellery boxes, watches and other valuables into a leather zip bag when she came across a cardboard floral design box. Recognizing that it was a box of letters and cards from Christopher, she was filled with emotion. Wanting to indulge her nostalgia, she opened it to have a little reminiscence. On top of the pile was a brown sealed envelope with her name written on it. Suddenly, Alex's words came to the forefront. Her stomach churned and her heart beat faster. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and pulled out a note which had been written by Christopher. Darling Julie, in case something happens to me, look in your brown bear. A little something from Grandad for you and our Harry. I told you I'd keep it safe. Your black and red suitcase is in the summer house. Look under the floorboards beneath the sofa and footstool. Love you always, from here and beyond. Christopher. 11/1/17. P.S. Sorry about the muddy boots yesterday. Feeling astonished and frightened, she quickly turned to her suitcases, counting them and checking each one. It suddenly struck her that one was actually missing. Realizing that she should have 3 small black suitcases, she tried to remember what they looked like. Black and blue, black and grey. Yes, black with red around the edges. She was unnerved and felt the goosebumps on the nape of her neck. She then opened the box containing the old brown bear. She realized that he had become fatter and heavier. How could I have not seen this before? An internal examination revealed a treasure chest of hundreds of gold coins buried in the stuffing. She smiled fondly and then chuckled, and soon the chuckles turned to tears. A few minutes later, she tied up the stitches and put the bear in the zip bag along with her other valuables. She read the note again, realizing that it was written a day before the accident. The incident with the muddy boots suddenly struck her. When she had returned home from her Monday evening's fitness class, she found Christopher's muddy boots and the half-closed toolbox lying on the kitchen floor by the back door. "What are these doing in the kitchen?" I had to fix the floorboards in the summer house. I didn't want to keep putting it off," he told her. "Oh, Christopher, you've trailed mud all over the kitchen floor. I spent ages cleaning it this morning." She always used his full name when chiding him. "You could have at least closed the toolbox properly and put it away. I suppose I'll have to do that. And you've not cleaned your boots. I'll do that as well, shall I? I hope you weren't wearing them in the summer house." But as always, he had apologized sweetly, displaying acts of affection to quickly appease her anger. What a nag I was. Julie carefully put away the note. She reached for her mobile and Alex's card. She stopped sniffling and dialed his number. "Hello, is this Mr. Alexander Papas?" "Yes, speaking." "I'm Julie Fernandez. I think I might need your help after all." The end. I hope you liked that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please click like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thanks. Bye.